Virgin Galactic launches on the stock market. Sir Richard Branson's company became the first public space tourism company ever this morning. Those shares have been rising in their trading debut. Let's go straight now to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. My co-host Adam Shapiro is there to take off. Adam?
Julie, thank you. And of course, we have Sir Richard Branson with us, but also some very important people who are part of this big day. We've got Chamath Palihapitiya, who is one of the men who made this possible, bringing this company to the public, as well as the CEO from Virgin Galactic, George Whitesides. Mr. Branson, let me start with you. When is that first flight? You're going to be on board, and who's going with you?
It will be next year. We've got something quite exciting happening, which we will be announcing soon as to who's coming with me. So watch this space.
Watch this space. But when we talk about space tourism, we're talking about the one vehicle that is flying now, and in February actually went up into the mesosphere, the edge of space, and that is the Virgin spaceship Unity. It's being fitted right now for the passenger cabin. Capable of taking 6 people. You'll be one of them, but is it Leonardo DiCaprio? Is it Ashton Kutcher? Who else?
No, I would love to see you again, so we're going to have another announcement. But okay. Yeah, as you know, we like to do things with a little bit of a splash, and we're going to have something quite exciting.
So this is a splash, and we're talking about a business, Chamath, that obviously you see a growth potential. Where is it? Because in previous interviews, despite having the 600 reservations, the $80 million in deposits, and the $120 million in potential revenue, how do you grow beyond that if there's only 2 million customer base out there?
Well, I think that we don't really know what the total customer base is, except to say that I think if you survey people in general, most people would raise their hands and say if they could go to space, they would. So really what we're doing is what many other businesses before us has done, which is you start with a beachhead, right? This is an incredibly technically complicated business that's taken Richard and George 15 years and $1 billion+ of capital to build. So today those tickets are reasonably expensive. That being said, over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll be able to sort of work to make it more efficient, make it more cost effective, and as the price goes down, the total addressable market should go up. The best corollary to this that we've seen before, if you think about Tesla, they start with a Roadster, they start with the Model S, and now where is their commercial success? How do you build a $60 billion company? It's by servicing the mass market. And similarly, I think we'll be on that path over the next decade.
When you talk about Tesla, by the way, they've got a Roadster already on its way past Mars. But when you talk about bringing the costs down, how do you make this accessible? Because a ticket right now is $250,000. But a geek like me who wants to do this, how do you bring it down so that I can afford it?
Well, I think George is probably the best in capable of answering it. But let me tell you from my perspective what I saw. The greatest thing, if you're thinking about trying to bring costs down, is to actually know that you have an incredibly profitable business as it is. And the reason is because those profits help you figure out how to innovate such that you can actually bring costs down faster than you thought. And this is a business that has almost 70% operating margins, which means that it is as good of a business as a Google or an Apple or a Facebook.
How do you bring those margins, though? How do you protect them, but then bring on more aircraft, or spacecraft rather? Only one flying now. What does being at scale? Because I think Chamath actually was quoted in a previous article that mid-next decade, you'll be at scale. What does that look like? How do you get there and protect those margins?
When our run out, we project out 5 spaceships operating by 2023, and that'll offer a fair amount of capacity into the market. Not a huge amount, but like a fair amount, so that we'd be flying about 1,500 people a year. Which is exciting. And the way that we bring the cost down is the way that any other aerospace business brings their costs down, right? They learn how to build things faster, cheaper, better, and so we've already instituted certain manufacturing efficiencies in our rocket motor production process and in our spaceship production process. And what's really nice about our business is that actually adding another spaceship only requires that we add another 10 to 15% more people down at the spaceport. And so you can tell that basically the business really starts to sing after 2 or 3 or 4 spaceships, because your labor, your incremental labor is not actually that much more. So those are all the things that we'll be using that enables us to drive down that cost.
In a perfect world, when you're at scale, how much is a ticket going to cost me? I'm not a billionaire yet.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
The danger of us saying nobody will buy and they'll wait 20 years for that. But I think if we if we have 20 or 30 spaceships, which I think we will, in 20 years' time, the price will come down dramatically. That's all I think I can say. I think what we'll do is we'll exhaust the amount of people who can pay the 250,000. Then we'll, by then we'll have a number of spaceships. We'll be able to bring it down to 200. Then we'll be able to bring it down to 150, then 100, and so on.
So let me ask you this though: is this really a space tourism company, or is there something else here? For instance, Boeing created United Airlines to create demand for the product it made. Are you creating a product, the spaceship, that would be used for hypersonic travel, cutting the route from New York to Tokyo from 14 hours to 90 minutes? Is that really what's at play here?
To a large extent, it's part of what's at play. So Boeing have just invested in this company
$20 million.
Because they want to work with us in turning that into a reality, so in the future, we're the only spaceship company that are actually building spaceships that are shaped like aeroplanes, and therefore it's much easier for us to make them bigger and bigger and go point to point than it would be, for instance, for Elon or Jeff, because they're building big, more conventional rockets.
When you bring up Jeff, when you bring up Bezos, Blue Origin's actually making plans, perhaps, as is SpaceX, maybe take people to the moon, whereas it seems your play is keep it up to space, but maybe point to point. Chamath, I want to ask you something. This is very cool. You were part of something very cool years ago, which we call Facebook. What advice do you have for Zuckerberg? I mean, you had to watch those hearings last week, and you've been critical of Facebook in the past. Do you still let your kids not use social media? And what advice do you have them? No social media?
I do not.
Why not? And what would you say to Zuckerberg?
I mean, from my perspective, I just think that there's a pretty positive correlation with too much device use and social media at too young of an age, and frankly, a lack of really good mental health. And so I would like my children to just grow up in a really natural environment with the world outside, playing, running, winning, losing, failing, all the typical things that a child needs to do to build a robust sense of self. And then eventually, when they can afford it, they can buy a phone and then they can get on these social media sites. I have not used them myself for 6 or 7 years, and I find myself to just be in a much better mental state as a result.
So let's bring it back to space. Now, each of you, I'm going to start with George. What's the coolest part about this? I mean, we can talk numbers, we can talk investors, but this is just really neat. For you, what's the cool aspect?
For me, really, what it is enabling people to accomplish their dream, right? Like we have 600 plus customers who've already signed up. We have 3,000 plus people who want to buy tickets. These are people who have, in many cases, dreamed about flying to space for decades since their childhoods, and we're going to actually make that happen. And to me, that's just really inspiring.
Chamath?
Well, in my perspective, like I've been lucky to be around entrepreneurs who just find incredible ways of inventing things that haven't been seen before. And the reality is, as Richard said, yes, it's a plane, but yes, it's also a rocket ship. Yes, it may eventually be able to go hypersonic. The totality of that, to me, I find deeply inspiring. And the exploration of, life outside of just the Earth in which we live, I think is really important for humankind. So for me, it's just an opportunity to be around great people and help usher that along in my own way.
And for you, you launched this in 2004. You defied the critics. What's the coolest part for you?
Only 500 people have ever been to space, and that's including the Chinese, the Americans, the Russians, and we have the capability of putting hundreds of thousands of people into space in the years to come, and that's ridiculously exciting. And so, here we are on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, launching the first spaceship company, and it's going to, the resources we get from this are going to enable us to do wondrous things.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. It is exciting to be on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I'm going to put in a shameless plug for myself. It would be far more exciting to join you on that first flight in 2020, and they're promising that flight with Mr. Branson on board. The first flight will launch from Spaceport in the next 12 months or sooner. Back to you, Julie.
I know that space geek Adam Shapiro is very excited to be there talking about this today. Thanks, Adam. We'll see you back here in a little while.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.